Death, taxes, and team kids. The only things we can be sure of that will ruin our lives.
Facts.
Maybe don't know.
This time to build. 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 This time power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Chris Hampton.
And this is Nate Drolet.
And together we form Tony Vlachos and Sandra Diaz Twine.
You're making these up now.
No, these are these two humans are affectionately referred to as the king and queen of Survivor because they are the only two-time winners of the show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Survivor. And we're talking today about surviving, I can't talk today, the modern mega climbing gym. And essentially we're going to look at the 5 features of modern mega gyms that influence how we interact with them and how we conduct our sessions. I think there are kind of 5 big areas that we can look at here. And maybe we can give some actionable information for folks on how to avoid the death of climbing that could happen if you don't actively try to avoid it. And I am not super familiar with how to survive in the modern climbing gym because I feel lucky actually that I never
fortunate.
had to spend a lot of time in modern climbing gyms. I have during workshops and clinics that we've done. So I've gotten to know them a little bit and sort of understand the layout and what goes on in there. But the vast majority of my time has been spent in pretty small gyms and now in a home gym that has all the things I need and really nothing more. So I do feel pretty lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what a lot of my past experiences were, climbing in really small gyms, a lot of home walls, just tiny little places. You know, everything was always plywood walls.
Yeah.
And that was just what was common for me for a long time. But, you know, for the last 2 years, I was in Houston climbing at one of the massive mega gyms there, which, let me just say, an incredible place. Like, as far as it's enormous, beautiful, like everything you could want and need, and lots more for climbing.
Yeah, and one of the features that I love of the smaller gym is the tight-knit community. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things that I've found really hard to recognize in huge mega gyms. There doesn't seem to be as central a tight-knit community. I'm sure they exist kind of on the periphery and little cliques and things like that, but not really a tight-knit community. And I do think you were lucky to climb at a gym where, and I've said this several times on the podcast, that Sydney, who was the manager over there, really created a fantastic community and cultivated a community with the employees and the patrons. So
yeah, it was awesome. Super grateful for that. And something that we both kind of noticed as we traveled the country, it did seem like the further from rocks you got, the more a community formed in gyms, which makes sense because you go to a gym in like Colorado and people know each other, but what was super common, we would do workshops in places where people would be like, oh yeah, like climb around that guy 3 nights a week, but never said hi, don't know what their name is, anything like that. Because, the gym is much more of a utility in a lot of these places where your main focus is climbing and the gym is like what you do when you can't be climbing outside.
Mm-hmm. Yep, totally. So I do think you're lucky in that respect. Let's start. Number 1, the thing you see when you first walk up to a gym, into the gym, are the holds and the walls. This is essentially the the scaffolding for this business. If the setting is the product that they're putting out, then the holds and the walls are the scaffolding for that business. So I think in the modern mega gym, the big change that I've seen over the years and that I see in every gym is that it's kind of like big macro holds, big volumes, big sweeping walls, pretty tall walls,
Very tall walls.
scary tall in a lot of cases. And almost all the holds are super friendly.
Yeah.
There's not the tweaky, hard to use little crimps anymore. At least not regularly. Pockets maybe make a comeback here and there, but they're usually absent. So talk to me a little about the holds, walls, that sort of thing that we see in the gym, and how we can make sure we're getting what we need if we're outdoor rock climbers.
Yeah. I think you nailed it in a lot of fronts. Like, the holds are bigger, they're beautiful, they're pretty.
And with all the real estate that's there, I mean, tons of square footage, you have to have big holds to fill up the space.
Absolutely. And because now route setters use hold color to denote your climbs rather than tape. And so you have to have a lot more distance between climbs. Like, they even have to take things like color blindness into account, because once chalk gets on holds, they kind of all become a pretty general similar shade. So you can't put, reds right next to oranges or blues right next to greens. Like, you have to be, or purples next to black. Like, there are all these different things that you have to kind of be aware of. And because of that, you need to spread your climbs out a little bit more. And when you spread those climbs out, little holds look awful. Like, if you have a big, pretty, 15-foot tall wall that's a 45-foot wide, swath, and you have these little micro crimps on it and, no volumes, no big holds, it looks awful. You're just like, hey, setters didn't show up for work this week. Like, they just put some foot jibs up and called it a day. And it looks so good with these big volumes, big holds.
Yeah. I mean, I remember you and I going into a gym. The name just popped out of my head. In Virginia.
Sport
Rock.
Yeah.
And there was a route in there that was like all these enormous, like human-sized half moons, and
you could have fit inside every one of those volumes.
Yeah. And both of us were like, oh, we have to climb that.
We'll be top roping this right now.
That's the first thing I want to do right there as soon as I'm warmed up.
Yeah. Yeah. And also top roping, not leading, because leading that would have been horrifying.
Terrible.
Those holds stuck out like 3 feet from the wall.
Yeah.
It's just like trad climbing 5'6". Like, I guess I'll just die. Like,
you get stuck in a chasm and have to be rescued.
Yeah. Kris, I need you to go to the top and lower a rope down. Get me out.
Yep. But it looks great. It looks amazing. Super fun to climb. So
super fun.
I'm not mad at the giant holds.
Yeah. So there's some cool things about that. I think one thing that's important to keep in mind with these bigger shapes is that they're more ergonomic often, which lets you get a higher volume of climbing in. It's lower impact, but it's harder to prepare yourself for small crimps. Like, what I see in a lot of gyms between like traveling and where I was climbing is they will kind of sprinkle in a few crimp lines here or there. And some gyms even kind of have a limit. They're like, hey, we're not going to put hard crimping in on an overhang until it hits V6, V7, V8, something like that. Which ironically makes it really hard to warm up for those things.
Right, totally.
I'm like, I would love some little like V4 heinous crimp problems.
And hard to build up to them.
Yeah.
I've heard some coaches say that the skills you use at V7 aren't the skills you use at V10, but frankly, that's bullshit. They're the exact same skills. And it's the same way with V3 to V6. Why not learn those skills at a lower level so that you can apply them once you get to V6?
Absolutely. So yeah, like similar thing with pockets. I've heard of people say like, I've heard route setters say, we're not going to put pockets on anything below V6 unless it's like vert or slab kind of thing, and it's just absolute bucket pockets. Like we're not going to set hard pocket moves until it's something harder, because harder climbers should be able to prepare themselves better, or they'll be prepared. But the irony is that if they're not there, you're not going to be prepared.
Right. You're assuming they're going to prepare themselves on their own for this thing that you then throw at them later. And I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah. And bigger holds are easier to use for your feet, for sure. Like, I was joking just the other day that there are times I'll be climbing and I'm using, like, on a 45 half pad end cut crimps, and I'm stepping on toasters.
Right.
Like,
totally.
Could not have bigger footholds. And it's like, okay, like, that's cool. I could climb this in my tennis shoes, but like, this is not what I want to be doing, as someone who wants to prepare for the outdoors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are some ways around these things in the modern mega gym? Is there a way to get yourself prepared for small crimps or for pockets or for little feet that you're very likely to encounter when you go outside?
I think there are, and this is kind of specific just to hold types so far. We haven't talked about the walls yet, but I think for footholds, we have a drill that we like to use called Worst Feet in the World.
Mm-hmm.
And you practice climbing boulders, but stepping on either worst footholds that are around, or step on small little details of the holds that are near you. So maybe it's a big font ripply sloper. Step on a tiny little ripple in the corner. Like things like that. So intentionally use worst footholds. I've had some clients who climb out in Smith, and when they go to the gym, they'll just use the bolt hole in all the holds.
Yeah, totally.
Which is amazing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they just don't even step on the holds during this drill. They just step either that, or they pull a Brook Rabbit 2 and step in the bolt holes.
Yeah, the bolt hole on the wall, the T-nut hole, or I really like the bolt hole on the holds themselves, especially for these big macro holds. I think that's smart.
Yeah, so you can do things like that to practice worse feet. As far as crimping goes, like, you can make up boulders. I think making up is a good way to go, but also seek out the things that do exist. Because one thing that I did notice, like, let's say, your whole gym might only have a handful of, like, really hard, like, micro crimp lines, because they're not that popular. They're not super fun. I would much rather, for enjoyment, climb on, some beefy, rounded, comfy holds that I'm, like, monkeying around on.
Oh yeah, every day.
Yeah, way more fun. But these little crimp lines exist, so you kind of have to go hunt them out and repeat them, and repeat and repeat and repeat as long as they're around.
Yeah, and I think, even though gyms don't have a ton of density like they used to, and that's something we should maybe talk about as well, because it does hold us back in some ways, but there's almost always a way to make up slight variations of things. So, maybe you're climbing V4 and there's a V7 crimp line right next to this V4 you're doing. Add in one of those crimps using your big V7 or big V4 feet, and, go jug, crimp, jug instead of jug, 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 or whatever. Make up little variations. It doesn't have to be an entirely new problem. It can just be one hold that makes the difference.
Absolutely. And to kind of carry off of that too, we talked about, this is the sections on hold and walls. The walls in big gyms are enormous. Yeah. Once again, they're really pretty, and you have these big open spaces. It would look silly to have 8-foot tall walls, right? And inside of, places with 40 or 50 foot ceilings.
Right.
So they don't. They put in, something that's a third of the height of the gym, essentially, and they're kind of terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're scary. Man, I've seen a lot of bad falls. And also, I think as far as for trying to get top end power, like, big, long boulder problems isn't the best way about it.
Yeah, totally. And, even if it's not a bad fall, you're almost always being a little more cautious up there. So it's holding you back from giving 100% effort in a lot of cases. I mean, we're held back from giving 100% effort just because we're humans most of the time. Our body's regulating that, but you can't give your top effort when you're also scared and worried about this fall. And I mean, it's a real thing to get up there and be scared, be breathing harder. First time I climbed in a mega gym with a mask on, I was like, I couldn't breathe after the top of some of these boulders because I was scared up there. I was holding my breath, and it really just pointed out to me that people who really put a lot of stock in, I have to top this boulder, I have to top this boulder. A lot of them are spending a lot of energy just being scared, which also has its benefits, if that's what you want to work through.
Yeah. I think a good way to think about it is if you ever feel like you're high enough off the ground that you should down climb before you drop, you're probably high enough off the ground that you're not just like, eyes closed, everything flexed, going for it on that next hold. Like something that was really, I think, special about a gym I used to climb at, Tennessee Bouldering Authority, no longer around. I talked about earlier how everyone wants to climb in these dingy little dungeon training centers that are all plywood and dark, and it's just for, the strong kids. Everyone wants that, but they all seem to be going out of business.
Yeah.
And it's because they're not fun and they're not pretty. Or they can be fun, but it's...
And the people who want that aren't the people who want to pay for memberships either.
Yeah, exactly. That is a
They want
great
everything
point.
free. Let me set a boulder a month and give me free membership.
Yeah. And that, unfortunately, those are the kind of gyms that do those deals.
Yeah.
But this facility... Their padding was all doubled up mattresses for the whole place. Tiny place, so that's not a lot of mattresses. But in one way, it was super janky, and you're just like, God, I'm gonna like hit a spring again today. But what was amazing about it was the walls weren't super tall. Like the walls started at ground level, and so they rose up above the mattresses. So already you had like a 2-foot buffer. And I mean, the walls were maybe only like 10, 11 feet. So at the very top, you hung your feet down. Your feet were maybe 2 feet off of the doubled up mattresses. You could do a layout dyno from a hold at the top of the wall to another hold at the top of the wall, practically land on your neck. And you would just like bounce and be fine. And like,
not recommended.
I mean, it's closed. I don't think they're too worried about me like selling people on like neck diving. But what was amazing about it was everyone just went all out. Like you would fall on your side and back literally, 9 out of your 10 times. Like, and that was fine. Like you never thought about sticking a landing. And some people are like, oh, that's bad for outdoors. But this is training. We can separate training from outdoors.
Right.
And when I look at these modern mega gyms, no one goes like that. I mean, not people that survive.
No, when I'm in a mega gym and I watch people, it's almost always they drop off because they're scared, or they half-ass it and don't get there, and they're already looking for their landing, halfway through the move because they know they're not going to get there because they just half-assed it.
Totally.
And I do that myself in those mega gyms. I'll climb up and be like, nope, not committing to this. This problem ended right here.
Yeah, it's like when they're doing hard foot cuts, it's like their brain is halfway torn between, I'm going to try and stick this hold, but I also want to land on my feet.
Exactly.
Like, and you see it, and it's like everyone always lands on their feet in the gym. Like sometimes they hit and like roll back to their butt, but like how many times have you seen people just backsplat? Like, not that often. But also like, please don't backsplat from 14 feet. Like,
it's a real skill to be able to harness that, and not a lot of people can do it. Do you remember, I think it was Collegiate Nationals at Momentum in Houston, and Maddie, local superstar, went for it and didn't hold the swing and landed on her neck essentially from way up, and it was a really scary fall.
I think Brooke Rabitou got a knee injury or an pretty bad ankle injury at that same gym during, we were there to coach a workshop. What was that? National Cup series?
Yep, that was a National Cup series.
I think she actually had like an injury that put her out for a little while.
Yeah, it's not surprising, and that's not just in that gym. That's in a lot of gyms all around the country that I've climbed in.
Yeah.
And one thing I think we can do to alleviate that is, I tell a lot of my clients, I coach quite a few folks who are 40 and above, and I'm just like, don't ignore the arbitrary finish that the setter put up there and stop the boulder wherever you want to.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, especially if the crux isn't at the top, you've already climbed the grade, and regardless of the grade, we're just looking for you to challenge yourself. So get on something that's a grade too hard for you and finish it below the crux. As long as it's challenging, as long as you're having to project it for the right amount of time that we're looking for, then it's totally valid, and it doesn't matter what the arbitrary finish is.
Absolutely. And this was something I was going to bring up because you were saying, hey, if you're a V4 climber, add that V7 crimp. Same thing. Like, I've trained people who they're like V4, V5. Honestly, they would probably climb like V6 consistently if they weren't scared of how tall walls are. And I'm like, hey, most setting in modern mega gyms isn't super cruxy. It's more power endurance. Go get on a V7. I bet you can go halfway up a V7.
Yep. And
that does two things. One, it gives them the appropriate difficulty to work on. But two, suddenly they're like, oh, I can do the moves on V7s.
Yeah, totally.
Like, that's cool. Like, because they are so afraid to commit to, let's say, V6, because they're like, well, I see it's a big move to the top, and V6 is hard, and I'm going to be tired up there, and I don't want to take a bad fall. But if I can put them on, V7, they go halfway, and they're like, oh, that's really cool. Like, I could maybe do harder.
Yep. How do you feel about wall angles in the mega gyms? I personally feel like in that aspect of things, gyms have gone the right direction for sure.
Because slab is
Better
back
for climbers. Slab is back. Vert is popular. They aren't doing giant arches and weird boxes all the time.
I'm happy
to
for
fit 1,000 angles in.
Yeah, I'm happy for arches to kind of be dying, and especially though there used to be a really popular like stair step method of like horizontal roof to 90-degree vert, horizontal roof 90-degree vert, and they look kind of cool. All these like really aggressive angle changes. It'll be like, it looks cool, but if you've ever tried to route set on those walls, it's awful.
Right.
Like, oh, you can stim at any time, or also lip turns from a roof to a vert wall. Awful. Not fun to climb on, not fun to set. It's just trash. So I'm really happy that we have like better, bigger walls. Not necessarily bigger, but we have a lot better walls and better angles.
Yep.
I think the slab's cool.
Bigger sport walls though, which I do like.
Yo, those are great.
Yeah. It used to be you had to do up, down, ups in order to get enough mileage to simulate a sport climb.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I'm like, stop that fucking route halfway up if you have to. We're training for Wild Iris. We're not training for Red River Gorge here.
Yeah. I remember the first time I went to a 45-foot sport climbing gym and I was like, whoa, I'm going to get pumped. And now you go into a 45-foot gym, you're like, oh, I'm going to have to traverse into this thing.
Yeah. I mean, when you and I climbed at Sport Rock, we did a sport climbing session and it was like
huge.
80-foot walls.
We were just like giggling the whole time. We were like, if we had this, we never would have fallen in the red.
Yeah.
Like
totally.
you just get super fit and that's just it.
Yeah. Before we move on from this topic, let's talk a little bit about the density. I think it holds folks back for like circuits or, it can hold you back in terms of being able to make up your own boulders. When I came up in the gym, it was almost spray wall style everywhere. And one of the most fun, best things about climbing back in those days was that you would sit around with your friends and make up boulders based on what was already on the wall. You didn't have to add holds because there were lots of them there. There's tape everywhere, but you could make up boulders. And it was so much fun to do that. And I think that's been lost a little bit in the modern mega gym.
Yeah, absolutely. The old standard used to be there were a handful of people that would come in once a month. They got free membership for this. There were no paid route setters.
Yeah,
that was not a thing.
Sad days.
And they would just litter a wall with a ton of holds. And then like rolls of tape would kind of stay out or, they'd be in a closet that was easy access. So like, there was the guard of people who could they could sort of set and tape things.
Right.
Like there were the setters, then there was like the second tier people who were entrusted to be able to go tape something and put the right squiggly sign on
or the
tape.
right sticker from the grocery store or something.
Exactly.
Like that. Yeah.
From because we got Whataburger in Texas, so they have stickers that they put on the burger for like no onion, extra bacon, things like that. So every now and then,
Perfect.
there'd be those. It's like the pink with the bacon stickers.
Mm-hmm.
But that used to be it. Like, and now we have route setters who are starting to get paid more and more, which is awesome. And man, that's a hard profession, and I think they should be compensated well for it.
Yep.
Living wages. But, and with that, there's a lot of the things that we got rid of. I love that we got rid of tape. I thought that was going to be a terrible idea initially. I was like, I loved my tape. But man, as a route setter of that era, when the transition happened, the first day I did it, I was like, never mind.
Yeah.
This is better. I don't have to tape. I don't have to take tape down. Amazing. There are a lot of things that have gone in the right direction, but we've lost density. Like, people love fast turnover.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we'll talk about later, but, you can't have a super dense wall that also is set by color, that also is turned over quickly, unless you just have a team of, a monstrous team of setters. And most climbers in the gym don't want to spend that much time on one wall. They want to go to the next wall, Oh, this wall is set on Tuesday. Well, Thursday there's a new set. I'm going to go to the new set. Like, they don't want to spend time climbing 60 boulders on a 15-foot wide wall.
Yeah, and I have a big spray wall here at home, and I can very easily pick out when new people come into the gym whether they're a spray wall climber or not, by the way they can remember the boulders.
Mm-hmm.
Or you just get overwhelmed, and it's really hard. You have to put some real intention for multiple sessions in order to kind of get the lay of the land and understand that wall. And in the big mega gym, like you just said, when people want to be moving around, it makes a spray wall style wall tough for people because they never end up putting in the time to really understand the wall and get to know it. So they're never able to give big efforts because they can't even remember where the damned holds are.
Yeah. And this is something, yesterday we recorded a patron podcast on route memory.
Mm-hmm.
And I had completely forgotten about this till just now. I was talking with a client a few weeks ago, and we were talking about memory on route because I was like, hey, how's your route memory? He's transitioning from bouldering into sport climbing. And fortunately, he's like, oh, I've got great memory for that. And we sort of talked about, like, what do you think creates that? And one of the things we talked about that we both stumbled on was we both started climbing in gyms, 15 plus years ago, where makeups were almost everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you would have the initial things, but then you would have new taped sets, but also tape fell off. So you sort of had to remember what was there. But I mean, the makeups were that was half the fun. You had the set things, but the makeups was where the money was. And so you'd always memorize all these different things, and it was like a spray wall. And he did that as well. And we were, there's something was like, maybe there's something to that, like developing boulder and route memory from climbing on spray walls, essentially,
mm-hmm.
or doing makeup boulders.
Yeah, totally. And I think there has been a trend the last bunch of years for modern mega gyms to have spray walls somewhere in the gym. You and I have seen in our travels that they're very often totally empty.
Oh,
there's
desolate.
Nobody climbing on them,
mm-hmm.
cobwebs. And I think that's a shame. I think if you want to be good at outdoor rock climbing, if you want to hone those skills, a good way to get around the lack of density and the lack of creativity and being allowed to make up your own boulders, go to the spray wall. We've got a great course that I put together with my friend Zach Alexander, Boulder Builder, that is essentially about, if you have a spray wall or a board in front of you already, how can you make up really effective, fun, challenging boulders?
Mm-hmm.
So the links to that are right there in your show notes. And if you have a spray wall in your gym and you haven't utilized it, check it out.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say real quickly on hold types is skin.
Good. Yeah, for sure.
Because, man, I love the big fiberglass holds. They're so cool.
Yeah.
I watch comp climbers and I'm like, I want to do that. I want to do paddle dynos, like Kyra Condi. And all these other people. Super cool. Super
I don't want
rad.
Kyra Conti's skin though.
Oh God, no! And that's just it. Like they're like, oh, I made it through from qualifiers to semis, and then they show a photo of their hands, and they've got like 7 bleeding tips, and it's like, I hope that ring finger really carries you in semis. Jesus, dude, like it's always so bad. Or they'll be like, I mean, so we've got, you know, in this World Cup season, there are comps where there are only 2 weeks or even 1 week between bouldering comps.
Yeah.
You can't grow back skin that fast. It's
Right.
not possible. Like if you go through to where you bleed, like that's it. Like that immediately adds like a week of heal time to have good skin. Like yes, you're gonna stop bleeding, but you're not gonna have good skin for a
And you're
long
going to
time.
bleed faster the next week.
Yeah, like it's unfortunate. Like I think these holds are really sick. The problems on them are so fun. I mean, I would always almost get sad climbing on them because I would get to try them like twice. And then I'd look down and I'd be like, well, I've almost got like pink skin already from like 2 paddle dynos, and I want to go climb hard on crimps. And if I go through too thin, my skin's just going to sweat or like leak plasma essentially. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
or I'm going to bleed, and that's useless to me. So I do think between the fiberglass holds, volume climbing, and a lot of new holds, man, you can get torn up fast.
Yeah,
So-
limit your time on those things. If you want to climb more days, be effective more days, or you have outdoor climbing coming up, you really have to be careful about limiting your time on new grips. Anytime I buy new grips on my wall, I sand them down as soon as I get them. Like, I'm like, let's get rid of this texture as much as possible. And I'm glad that I do. You and I climbed at a gym in San Francisco, Dog Patch, I think.
Yep.
And they had some flooring issues where their original floor was all vinyl, and it had caused their holds to get kind of grimy and polished really quickly. And I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
We can climb all day in here
Yeah.
because we don't have to deal with any new texture.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really funny. Like I remember the first time I climbed on a moonboard back in like 2011. I climbed on it and I was like, God, I just wish these holds were more slippery. They were super textured, like sharp. And I was like, I wish someone would go through and just like, if it was my board, I would have like just sanded them down and have them be slippery, or not fully slippery, but just like not gritty to where I was going to I split a tip my second time ever climbing on a moonboard. And that was the first time in my life I'd ever split a tip indoors.
Right.
I was like, this is absurd. But now, now I want to do some benchmarks. I want those sticky grips. Like,
Yep. I bet you do.
so it's very funny. Like, I think it's important to have that mindset. If your goal is to use this, use the gym as training to prepare for outdoors, or if you're just in the season where you need to keep skin, it's good to keep that in mind. But, if you're indoors and you're trying to send some benchmarks, those sticky grips, brush thy board, as Ravioli says.
Yeah, let's move on to turnover rate. I think this is one of the big hallmarks of gyms, commercial gyms, mega gyms, and I suspect it's about average of 4 to 6 week turnover. That's about how long a boulder is going to last. I don't really know how long sport climbs last anymore.
Oh, I have no idea.
In the gym that I climbed in, they lasted like a year, so it was fantastic. You could project a thing forever. But boulders would disappear in 4 weeks. That's how long they would be up. And
It's so sad.
yeah, and that reduces our ability to have long-term projects. It also causes this interesting herd mentality. I talked about it in my book, The Hard Truth, where a new set pops up, and that's where everybody is. And by the second week a boulder has been up, nobody climbs on it anymore because there's 2 new sets already, and we have to go do all the new sets. And I've criticized this in the past as a way to sort of keep people in the same zone of difficulty, and people fall into this trap where it's like, I'm going to go do all the new V4s. Next week, I'm going to go do all the new V4s. Next week, all the new V4s, and so on and so on and so on for a decade, So, what's your experience with turnover? You were in a much bigger gym.
Huge
so was the
facility.
turnover as fast?
ultra fast. I think like 6 weeks.
Mm.
Man, those setters, just good for them for and they put up a lot of boulders per set.
And a lot of good boulders. So,
and great boulders.
Not complaining about that at all.
No, and it is not that, like, I don't blame setters for this. Because, like, I remember I was talking with one of them at one point, and because I was like, it'd be great. Half the turnover, double the density.
Mhm.
Like, can we make this a 3-month turnover? But you just, like,
Yeah.
double set every time, like, every one. And I was like, that would be amazing. Like, double back and just increase more density. And they were like, let me show you something. And it was just like a box of comment cards.
Mm.
Every third one is like, the holds get dirty too fast from things not being set fast enough. We need more problems. Set faster, turnover faster.
Wow, that's crazy to me.
And they turned over 2 walls a week. And I mean like walls, not like, oh, this is a little section. Like we'll do this little panel today and that panel next week. No, like big sections. And yeah, people, and I'd hear it in the gym too. People would just be like, it would be the second day of a set. And they're like, oh, I can't wait till Thursday when the next set comes out.
Yeah, I need more of those V4s.
Exactly.
Forever and ever and ever.
And I think some people do fine with this. The people who are in the gym like 6-7 days a week, they do pretty fine because they can, honestly, they can like kind of climb out a set or like climb out what they're going to be able to do quickly.
Yeah.
So that's not as big of a deal. And also a lot of times those are the people complaining where they're like in there 6 days a week. Though they could always go back to the old sets and climb things that are harder for them.
Yep.
But
I wonder if have you ever heard of something like this or if any gyms do it, but, keep the same turnover rate, keep the same density, but do a poll every week with what from this set would you vote to keep up?
mm-hmm.
Let the community vote on it. And every time you turn it over, keep one boulder up. Whatever the most people are projecting and want to keep up. I think that would be super fun. Like here's this boulder that's now been up for 9 months because people keep voting it in. I would love that.
They like mark it, take it down, wash it, put it right back up.
I've done that with a sport route in the gym actually. And I have a note in my Google Calendar, RIP yellow route, that Yasmin and I both have, and we send each other messages on the death of the yellow route when it finally got taken down for good.
Yeah. That's something that, so used to climb at TBA in Chattanooga, and this turnover was like kind of slow. Like to me, it was perfect. I would never ever called it slow, but there were a lot of strong climbers there. Like that was where Jimmy Webb and like Brian Voges, 2 V15 plus climbers were at. And they would just keep their projects up. Cause like whenever we'd go through and strip the wall, like if someone had a project that they were psyched on, it would just stay another round. And, if it's good enough for a bunch of these super strong people, like that's probably good enough for most people. Yeah. But it's I get it. Like I don't blame setters. Honestly, I blame the patrons. Like, and I want it. Like, I want new sets because it's fun. It's a great distraction. Like, why would I want to go back to a boulder that's hard for me and hurting my feelings if I can go to the new set, shiny things?
More V4s.
Man, might be a soft one this time. I'd love that.
I do like the soft ones. I'm absolutely not mad at soft ones.
Yeah. But, there are a few things like circuits are super tough with high turnover rate. Man, I got devastated last year. And obviously I knew it was going to happen, but I wasn't prepared emotionally. I was training for a sport climbing trip and I had an 8-month plan written out. Or not 8 month, 8 week. 8 month, Jesus.
I was like, wow, you did live in Houston.
It might as well have been 8 months, let's be real.
I've got a 6-year training plan I'm working on.
Yeah. 8-week plan. 6-week turnover. We both know how numbers work. But I started building these circuits. I had, power endurance circuits, linked 4x4 boulders, all these different things. And I started with the newest set when I did it because I was like, I want this to last. And I tried to trickle in things as I would go. But also as I got fitter and stronger, I kept kind of like, initially what were like good double boulders for me became, oh, this is a good triple boulder or a good 4x4. Like none of them made to a linked 4x4 boulder. That was like a dream. I was like, I'll end up doing this 4 times in a row without resting, down climbing jugs. No. It's just like, it's going to be a little easier to do doubles on it. But man, the 6-week mark hit and I was just flying. And I went in one day. I don't know what lies I had been telling myself, but I just saw I was like, oh, half my circuit's gone.
Yeah.
Like, cause I had unknowingly come back to some of the old sets, and the old sets no one went to anymore. It was perfect.
Yep.
So I was like, yeah, I'm going to use this for my limit boulders and all my endurance work and power endurance work. Cause it's empty. This is the perfect place for me to take up the whole wall. And they all went down, and I was just like, I don't even care anymore. And so it was I kind of coasted in the last 2 weeks, got good work in, but it was I was like, this sucks. And same thing for repeating hard boulders. I think hard boulder circuits are maybe the most underrated training tool in climbing.
Yeah. Super, super important.
And, if you're losing them every 6 weeks, that's not long. Especially,
Right.
I want things that are, this took me 3 sessions to send. I want to repeat that. And if I try and find 5 of those, okay, that takes me 15 sessions essentially. Well, we'll assume I climb on more than one each. Let's say it takes 10 sessions. Okay, that's 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose those soon.
Yeah. I very often program for my clients, and give them specific instructions to let's do our warm-ups and our drills and flashing and things like that. Let's do that out in the main gym area.
Mm-hmm.
And mini projects out in the main gym area. But then when it's time to build a circuit or have a long-term project, let's do that on the spray wall or on the boards, where it's not going to go away. We can still be working on it the next cycle if we want to. We can keep these same boulders in the training cycle next time for your circuits if we're still working on the same project route. It just doesn't make sense to get attached in that way to boulders that are out in the main gym area.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. But I wanted more three-dimensional
Come
things.
on, Nate.
It made sense for my goals. I was I need more three-dimensional, more powerful climbing.
Yeah, that's one of the tough things about the boards that I often lament is you have a 25 move compression project you're working on. Tough. Sorry, there's no boards that do that.
Yeah, and it's we had a moon board and a spray wall, and I used both. And I think both are great tools, but man, it for the things I wanted to do, I also for me personally, it was really helpful to climb on things that I didn't set. Because man, I am really good at playing to my strengths in a way that's just weird enough where I'm that's kind of a weakness, right? Yeah, I wouldn't normally have my foot facing that way, but everything else is just locked in.
Right.
I'm last thing I'll say on turnover rate is competitions. You got to deal with those. Sometimes they're the worst. Some gyms, I'm not going to name names right now, but I have several clients in a certain part of the country who all climb at the same gym. And this gym will have comp series for part of the year where it's okay, they close the gym essentially for a full, they'll close the bouldering area for a full week once a month for 3 months in a row. And I'm about to call up the owner at this point because I'm just hey, you are fucking up all of my clients right now. We got shit to send.
This is your fault.
And all of them are just hey, yeah, they have to get punch passes to another gym.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a real thing for sure. Comps, especially, during the comp season, you have to be really careful about it. It could be a brand new set.
Gone.
It just got set a week ago. And you're hell yeah, this is going to be in my circuit for the next 6 weeks. Gone next time you come in the gym because there's a comp coming up.
Yeah. And the new comp set might be super sparse. It also might be comp styled.
Mm-hmm.
Weird. But not only that, the setters probably aren't going to come and backfill super quick because they're exhausted because setting for a comp is tiring.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, a lot of forerunning. So it might be blank for a while.
Yep, totally. And we talked a little bit about crowds in the turnover rate and how the crowds sort of move from one section to the next, herd mentality. But we haven't really talked about crowds in general or team kids. That's our number 3 here. Crowds and team kids.
Death, taxes, and team kids.
Death, taxes, and team kids. They're the only things you can be sure of to ruin your day.
Yeah.
And it's a real thing in a lot of gyms, and certainly in the gyms that I climbed in on team kid night, it was like, don't even bother.
Yeah.
You know? But I'm curious if the big mega gym like you were in, were team kids ever a thing there?
Yes. I'm not going to mince any words here.
The look on your face.
Yeah, there were team kids. And, the thing is, bigger gyms typically like to have bigger teams.
Sure.
Not only because sometimes teams can bring in revenue, but also a lot of gyms feel like there is clout to having a good competitive team.
Right.
So they try and build up the teams as big as possible. And, a lot of climbers like to go to the new set whenever it's up, and turns out so do teams.
Team kids are climbers. Imagine that.
Exactly. And here's the thing too. It's like, when a 9-year-old cuts me off 8 times in a row to go to the wall, like I can't be like, hey, this is your fault.
You're not just going to stomp that kid?
Maybe back in TBA.
I've actually saved a lot of children's lives in gyms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of like air traffic control of like telling people not to like, hey, stop, don't down climb. There's a child walking under you. I know they have a team shirt on. They should know better, but they don't.
Oh yeah. I have snatched some kids up off the mats, like to their terror. And I'm like, I just saved your life, homie.
Dude. So a lot of that, and I get it, if you're a competitor, you're trying to do new boulders you've never seen. That is what a competition is. So newer sets. And if you're a team, you're going to travel as a team around the gym. Yep. So it's like, oh, we have this, this cluster of 14 children. We're going to take them to this wall now. And it's probably going to be a newer set, or just anything that's like popular. Or if it's like stronger kids, they're going to go to a harder set. 14 of them.
Yeah.
And they're all going to be doing they're all needing to get in on the wall. And like, that's a lot of people. It can get hectic. So that's something that you kind of have to work around. I know people that will change their training schedules around when kids aren't there.
Yep.
It used to be easier. A lot of teams used to just train 2 to 3 days a week, but it's really common now that kids, kind of the standard in competitors is like, man, they'll have those kids train 3 to 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Like weekdays.
More and more like gymnastics.
Yeah. And you'll also see they're like, oh, we have our competitive A team, competitive B team. We have the
rec team,
the maybe pre-comp team. We're going to have them all train different days so that they're not overlapping.
Wow.
Before you know it, from like, it's essentially from like 5 to 8 p.m. every weeknight during the season, which now is like seemingly year round.
Yeah. That's a real thing.
Yeah. And that's like, I won't go on this tangent any longer, but death taxes, team kids.
Real thing. And as far as I know, the best method is to, if you have the privilege of being able to move your schedule around. Maybe spending time on the older sets is a smart idea when the team kids are going to be in there. Like plan that as your day of repeats or something like that, and don't make it your flash boulder day. If the team kids are going to be there, because they're going to be on your flash boulders and you're not going to get a turn.
Yeah. If they do come to the old set, face push them out of the way. You're bigger than them. Like, we're adults. We pay bills. We can do this.
Recommended. Most of the time.
But yeah, so team kids. And then crowds. So there's like, I have this kind of split into 2 groups. There are, crowds in general, which I think you can, in one way, use to your advantage, and one way maybe you want to avoid. And then there are also just other climbers that, if we're talking about climbing at small gym or climbing at a home wall, there's an advantage to having other climbers around you.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at crowds, like if you have some sort of like anxiety around climbing with other people near you, that can kind of be useful.
It's a good way to work on it.
Like, you want to go climb classic boulders, classic routes outside, other people do too.
Yep.
Like the more stars there are, the more people you're going to have.
Absolutely.
And
I don't
so-
even see stars as quality anymore. I just see it as how big the crowd's going to be around the boulder.
Exactly. 5. Yeah. Oh, there's this boulder with 6 5-star lines and everything from V2 to V8. Oof.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's add that up. 30 total stars. That approximately 300 people.
Yes. So that can be a good way to practice, even if you're just on the outskirts, like getting used to climbing around other people, negotiating lines with other people, huge. So that can be helpful. But if you if you're busy and you need to get in and out, find ways around crowds. Like don't go on the nights they set. Like that's something that can work really well. Like let's say if they set Tuesday, Thursdays, do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, things like that. That's going to be way less busy just as a default. Because a lot of people do like to line up with when the sets are.
Yep. Saturday late morning is probably a no-no in a lot of places. There's going to be a lot of birthday parties and,
Oh, yeah.
Cub Scout groups and things like that.
Yeah. Shout out to Momentum Silver Street. They did not allow birthday parties.
Wow, really?
Yeah, we brought up Sydney Smith earlier. And when they were first open in the gym, they were like, should we do birthday parties? She was like, no. They're like, but it brings in money. She was like, yeah, but so do adults who don't like kids. And we're in downtown Houston.
Facepalm.
Exactly. Yeah. And have a lot less face push children if we don't have birthday parties. No birthday parties. I got to say, man, what a blessing. We talked about crowds and like the bad things, team kids, whatever. I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could ban little children parties.
I mean, I'm all for that. And yeah, I'm all for that.
Yeah. Wonderful.
when I climbed at RockQuest in Cincinnati, this is one of the benefits of a crowd, actually. You knew coming in on a Saturday that there were going to be a Cub Scout group, a birthday party, a bunch of people just wandered in, whatever. It was going to be packed in there, full of a bunch of people who didn't know a whole lot about climbing. So you knew walking into the building that there was going to be a line for the 40-foot horizontal roof that went out over the entire gym. And there were going to be Cub Scouts clapping for whoever it was that was being lowered off the end of it.
Yeah.
Every single weekend. So it's a benefit that you get to show off, but maybe check your ego and try to improve at climbing instead of just playing for the crowd.
Yeah. So yeah, crowds, like, if you're busy, try and avoid them. Climb on older sets. Like we talked about, boards and spray walls, both can be great.
Yep.
I gotta say, like the moon board at Momentum, didn't matter. There could be 600 people in the gym. Be 2 people on that moon board.
Yeah, and one of the negatives of a training area that we'll talk about later on in this podcast is that it's a little bit intimidating sometimes to walk in there, but that can also be a big positive when it's a crowded day at the gym.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I'll play it up. I'm wearing all black over in the corner, hood up. It doesn't matter. It's 98 degrees outside. I got my hood up, and I'm just mean mugging people.
Got temporary face tattoos that I put on.
Exactly. Does that guy moonboarding have the same Mike Tyson tribal tattoo on his eye? Yeah, exactly. Like these are my LEDs.
Yep.
But yeah, so you can avoid them. But I will say there's a way that other people in these big mega gyms can be helpful. Something that was really tough for me was the fact that as an outdoor climber, I climb grades worse indoors.
Same.
Like, especially in more like big gyms that set these like powerful, more simple styles. Like, I use intermediates. I use a lot of foot moves. Like, that's just not a thing. And man, they're all so strong.
Yeah.
Like, one of my favorite stories. So I got a buddy that I climb with who I also train now back in Houston, who has climbed outside a bunch and really takes it seriously. He's climbed up to V12 outside. He's a good climber. But like me, maybe doesn't show it that much in the gym. Like you see him, you're like, oh, he's just kind of like average, strong guy in the gym. So one day we're climbing and this guy comes up who's real strong, very gym strong. And like, he looks over at my buddy Brian. He's just like, how hard do you climb? Brian's just like, oh, he's like, I've climbed V12 outside. And the guy pauses, looks him up and down, and he's like, I don't see it.
I don't see it.
I don't see it. So every time I see Brian, just like anytime, like we went on a trip to Waco together and he like fell off, you know, slipped off the warm up or something, just looked at him. I was like, I don't see it.
Man, you just named my next proven plan, Jim Strong. This one's for the bros.
But man, they're like, initially it was actually kind of hard to climb around for my ego because everyone is so physically strong.
Yeah.
Like just in this raw, simple power style. But you know what? Like eventually I leaned into it and I was like, hey, I'm going to try and climb around these people more because this is a style I was bad at.
Yep.
And I can honestly say like after 2 years, like I feel like that has become, it's maybe not I wouldn't call it my greatest strength, but it is no longer a weakness.
Yeah. Yeah. Super important, I think, to at least occasionally embrace those crowds and even the team kids, you know, watch some 9-year-olds flash a project. I
There's
think
some really good kid climbers. It's cool to see.
It's
like,
good for your ego, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. It is rad seeing how good youth climbers are.
Yeah.
Like that's really cool.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break. Are you searching for a training structure that actually works? For over a decade, we've helped climbers prepare for their goals. We've seen patterns emerge, showing what's most effective for each level of climber. Those patterns became our proven plans, a training system that you can follow from complete beginner to V double digits. Delivered through our mobile app with workouts geared toward your goals and focused on improving not only strength and power, but tactics and mindset as well, each proven plan comes with a built-in group chat and an option to work directly with one of our coaches. We don't believe in a one-size-fits-all approach to climbing. You shouldn't either. All right, we have returned. We're talking about how to survive in the modern mega climbing gym. Next up on the list is a training area. Number one, I think it's amazing that training areas have popped up and are so prevalent in these climbing gyms. It was a struggle to get a training area in gyms that I grew up in. You know, there would be like one hangboard and maybe a campus board.
And a member bought that hangboard.
Yeah, absolutely. And built the stand that it was on. You know? There were very rarely weights in the gym. Very rarely, I mean, you never saw a barbell. There was certainly not a barbell in gyms back then.
I couldn't honestly tell you the first time I saw a barbell in a climbing gym. It honestly wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like maybe in the last 5-6 years.
Absolutely. Training has exploded in the last 5 or 6 years, and it's just taken for granted now that your gym's going to have a training area. And I think there's some pros and cons to these training areas. Number one, I think there are just too many options in a lot of these training areas. You know,
too damn nice.
It's too damn nice. Too many options. Too many gimmicks. Tough for people to know what to do. You know, I'm a big fan of minimalizing and not giving a million options. Just give the options that actually make sense for the largest cross section of people.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you climbed in a gym that had one of the largest training areas I've ever seen.
It was beautiful. Honestly, like I miss it. Like it was so nice. I mean, I feel like if the company Rogue made anything, they had like at least 2 of it.
Yeah.
It was insane. It was overwhelming. There was a lot of stuff. And there were a lot of people. So there were a couple ways you kind of had to work around it. Like to me, one was figuring out what was popular.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, bench press.
Really? At the climbing gyms?
Oh man. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Bros love their bench press.
I thought it would just be like a line of 27 people deadlifting.
There was also, that was the second thing I was going to say. Deadlifting was way, like, to the point to where they had a shocking number of barbells. I mean, maybe a dozen barbells.
Wow.
4 types, too. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Gosh.
I know. Once again, like, it's funny.
Part of me loves it. Part of me's like, come on, man.
Yeah. I had some hip tendonitis, I think 2 years ago, and I worked with a physical therapist from Barbell Medicine, and he was like, "Okay, well, you know, you're a climbing gym. What kind of equipment you got?" And I like took some photos. I took some photos and sent to him, mostly as a joke without saying anything, because I was like, he's gonna lose his mind. And he was like, I might. He's like, I would train here.
Yeah.
Like,
how
this
much
is
is a membership to your climbing gym?
Yeah. This is a guy who like overhead strict presses like 200 pounds. And he's like, I would train at your climbing gym.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was like, yeah, it's dumb. We have like quadruples of every kettlebell up to like 90 pounds. But things get busy. Deadlifting, super, super popular. Squat racks are typically pretty filled. A lot of bench pressing, a lot of cardio machines. More than anything, to me, the biggest was finding what wasn't going to be busy and then kind of planning my schedule around that, which it can be helpful to just understand alternatives. Like, because there were times where I was like, hey, I'm going to deadlift this phase. Like just standard conventional deadlift. Man, I might work late, be a little bit busy. I might not get in until like 7 p.m. I get there. It's like, oh, cool. Every barbell is taken.
Yep.
Like, and go use a Saxon bar or something. They didn't have a Saxon bar, but that would have been taken for sure. That would have been kind of cool.
Absolutely, that would have been taken. There'd have been a line for the Saxon bar.
For sure.
But if you do understand, either double kettlebell deadlifts or swings or something else that you can do in place of it, I think that's really smart. So some self-education, really good way to go.
Totally. Understanding variations, understanding different equipment. And fortunately, like having worked as a strength coach in the past, I was very comfortable alternating different modalities. And plus it's fun. And that's, for me, that's one of my notes is I think when you have a million options, go ahead and just pick like 2 or 3 tools and say, hey, I'm going to use this for the next like 3 months.
Yep. Keep it simple.
So I'll be like, hey, I'm going to do kettlebells and rings. One of my favorite combos. Like, I'm just going to do kettlebells and rings, because then I'm not going to get bogged down with, well, there's also the barbell. There is all these other calisthenic things I can do. There are dumbbells.
There's all these quarter-pound plates I could be putting on.
There are so many quarter-pound plates I could be putting on. Yeah, and so I would just like play around. Or sometimes I'd be like, I'm just going to do calisthenics and dumbbells. Like, I would do that for like 2 months. And I mean, like, honestly, you can get strong doing whatever.
Yeah, lots of people have. I don't care what the internet trainers all say. You don't have to be doing huge compound lifts all of the time in order to get strong.
Yeah.
Lots of people get really strong off body weight exercises. So
yeah. So I think that can be really helpful is pick a few tools, kind of dive into them, have fun, and like have that be your focus. A lot of the little gyms I've trained at or home walls are so limited. It's like, okay, they have 2 kettlebells, 3 dumbbells, not sizes, dumbbells.
Right.
Like, oh, you're using the 15. Okay, cool. I'll wait. Like, or I'll try with the 40 because that's the next jump we've got. There's like a 10, a 15, and a 40 dumbbell But in those facilities, I almost never heard people complain about what was there. It was like you just made do.
Yep.
But suddenly, like the more equipment you have, the more it's like kind of the paralysis by analysis of just like, oh, there's so many things, or like, they've got 4 different Rogue barbells. And they're like, well, but it'd be nice if they had more of them with knurling in the middle for my single arm deadlifts.
Right.
That was actually me making that complaint, but
well, got to complain about something.
Yeah, exactly.
I think keeping it simple is the way to go there, especially with strength training. Like we mentioned before the break, walking into a training area when there are a bunch of people in there really focused, everybody's got headphones on, they're all training. It can be really intimidating, you know? Boards are relatively small. So if there's already 2 people at the board, it's like, I don't know if I can join in on that session, who takes over the app? How's this going to go?
That Mike Tyson dude's mean mugging me.
Yeah, that dude with the face tats. He certainly wants to climb by himself. But I don't think it needs to be. And I want to be careful when I'm saying this, but I certainly think there can be a group of people who are like, they're purposely making it a little intimidating, and maybe they are dicks. That's absolutely a thing at the climbing gym. However, it's most of the time it's not like that.
Yeah.
And we have to look at our own selves and try to get through the intimidation factor. You know, a lot of that is you. It's you being intimidated. The place is not necessarily intimidating. So work to get over that. And then if there is somebody in there being a dick, you know, it's not you that's imagining this shit, you know. But I do think that's one thing I hear a lot of that I don't think is true. I hear it like about the mother lode at the Red. It's so intimidating there. I'm like, man, it's a much nicer place to climb than like the 512 crag, because those people have the giant fucking egos.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So give it a try, lean into it. Certainly could be a problematic atmosphere. The climbing's not immune to that, but make sure you're checking yourself first.
Absolutely. You know, and I joke around about mean mugging and fake face tats, but realistically, like, man, the training areas are always like, people are serious. If, you know, they may have headphones on, they're maybe writing down numbers and they're like zeroed in. But man, a lot of my favorite conversations I ever had in that gym were like under the hangboard.
Yeah.
You know, and I never had an issue with anyone working in. And you know, if you do run into someone who's a dick, the cool thing is they're probably the only one and everyone else thinks it too.
Yeah.
So you now have a connection point with everyone else. It's like, man, ain't that guy a dick?
What's that guy's problem?
Yeah. And they're like, right? He sucks. And you're like, yeah, I'm Nate. Like, there you go. You're in. Like, but I agree. They can be intimidating, but you know, I mean, I've never been bothered by someone coming up and like chatting with me. If I'm busy, I'll be like, hey, like, I'll still communicate with you, but I'm working through my reps. So, you know, as long as it doesn't bother you that I'm like going to pause for 10 seconds at a time as I do hangs or, you know, as I do these swings, we're here. Let's, you know, hang out.
Yep. Do you have any strategies and maybe how does it work? Because I haven't spent any time in a commercial gym, regularly going to boards. How does the like who controls the app work, or getting into a session where there's already 3 people on the moon board? What's that look like?
Oh, it can be different. Normally I'm always like, I feel like it's always that thing where you're like, oh, no, you take the app. But then when someone's like, doesn't offer, like, even if you were going to say no, you're like, no, you could have offered. But I don't know. I've never really had a big issue. Like, I've got a good enough memory. And typically I'll talk with people like, if I'm circuiting, like if I'm going through a bunch of boulders, like I'll be like, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm circuiting. A lot of times people will come back and they're like, oh, I just wanted to get away from a crowd. Like, can I circuit with you? I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Or sometimes if people are like projecting something and I'm circuiting, I've had people be like, hey, I'm trying the same boulder for the next 30 minutes. It's 4 holds. You want to use it? Because I see you having to memorize all these boulders. But otherwise, like, I don't think it's too big of a deal. Like, if you're familiar with whatever the board is, it's easy enough. The tension board app is really nice because it has the auto log out. So like you can set it to where after 5 seconds of you selecting yours, someone else can connect. So you climb yours and then they immediately can just like hit the button and it lights up theirs. That's cool. That's ideal. Moon, get on this.
Yeah. I know there are some folks who have, you know, some issues with jumping into those kind of sessions. So I think communication goes a really long way. And it's a great way to learn the communication at the crag too.
Yeah.
You know, when you roll up to a boulder and there are already 12 people there sessioning the boulder, it can be a little stressful to try to figure out how to cycle in with that crew, or if there's a queue under your sport route or whatever.
Yeah, you know, but if you walk up, like if I go up to a boulder outdoors and there's a bunch of people working on it, you know, I'll be like, hey, y'all want some extra pads? Next thing I do, pull out my brush. I start brushing holds.
Totally.
Like, man, they're already like, hey, it's one of us. We're good.
Yeah.
Like,
yep, exactly.
Like,
all right. Next up, one of the things that is heard really often, I hear the most complaints about this in the modern mega gym era, frankly, and that's the setting style.
Too compy.
Too compy, too many big holds, which we've already talked about. But, you know, a lot of people are making the case, and in some cases, it's a valid argument that it's not really the same style that you're climbing outside. You don't find these kind of boulders outside.
Yeah.
And I think the setting nowadays is much, 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 much better.
Yeah.
I think it's a better environment for the setters. I think it's better for the gyms. I think it's better for climbers in general. But there are also still plenty of lazy setters out there. So, I'm not high-fiving every setter out there. You know who you are if you're just fucking lazy. It definitely still happens where the only way of making something more difficult is putting the holds further apart, making a hold worse. There's no creativity to it. But I'd say by and large, setters are good. They think about these things. They've put a lot of thought. They've been educated about how to make boulders or how to make routes.
Yeah.
And I think really what's happening is that they're moving away from outdoor styles that we understand or that we can readily identify.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, most of these gyms I've been to that set with some comp styles, I can absolutely tie this to something I would use outdoors.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's, people also say, oh, well, you're just going to get injured because they're like big shoulder moves. I don't know if you've gone outside, but you use your shoulders there too. Like, there's this thing that we all do. And I think it's really fascinating. And I would love to survey people, like a large group of people. Whenever you think about climbing, and because people will say, oh, well, hard climbing is all about the posterior chain. You never use the front of your body. Or they're like, well, I was telling you yesterday, when I started climbing, someone was like, well, outdoor rock climbing is just crimps. Pinches don't exist outdoors.
Yeah.
And we all have these mental models we create. Like, when you think about, okay, I want to train, what muscles do I train? What kind of things should I do? What is the thing you think of? Like, there was a time where to me it was like, oh, it's a 45 and a crimp ladder. Like
Right.
That was what, I was like, that's rock climbing. And it's funny because I had climbed outside plenty, but my default mental model was that.
Yeah.
Like I didn't think, oh, I do these weird moves where I ball up, get into a bicycle, but my right arm is fully extended in like an iron cross. And then I, like trust fall backwards into an undercling.
Yeah.
But
or I'm just bumping my hand 6 inches, but it took me 17 seconds to get in position to do that.
Yes.
Like
though that was not my default mental model. And it's still not my default mental model. And you shouldn't have one. Like you should have many, many ones that you go through. But I do think we all have a few that we like to latch to.
Yeah.
And that's where I believe a lot of complaints against indoor setting comes from is like, oh, well, that's competition climbing. It's not like outdoors. And, that's just injury prone. Like one of my favorites is that these moves aren't like biomechanical or,
biomechanically advantageous.
Yeah, they don't
put you in
fit with your
advantageous positions.
Exactly. They're like, well, it doesn't go with how your body should go in the right
how
positions.
your shoulder's supposed to be when you do this move.
Yeah.
I was just looking at a paper that's the next one Paul and I are going to do for Breaking Beta. By the time you hear this episode, we'll have done it already. So check out Breaking Beta Season 2, Episode 2. And they very clearly say this is the correct shoulder position. Everything else is incorrect. I'm like, wow. So I got one rock climb I can do.
Yeah. And that's just it. Like humans don't make outdoor rock climbs.
Right.
Like and that's what's really cool about it. Like it's just this structure and it's how do I conform myself to this structure? But a lot of us want these structures to be conformed to us.
Yeah.
And a lot of like good or just fun route setting, like it does conform to us. Like, ooh, this foot's where I want it. Like I hit this hold and it's at just enough of a side pull that my wrist is in a beautiful neutral position, as comfortable as it'll ever be, all these things. And that is fun to us. But, you talked about lazy setting. Like I think any route setter who's been in the game for 2 years can set fun, simple, flowy climbing because it's not hard. But to be able to push the barriers of, I want to challenge you as a climber. I want to challenge myself as a setter to see what's possible. I want to prepare you for things you're going to experience in the future. Like that takes work and that's not comfortable. It's not this beautiful, flowy, comfy thing. It can be fun and it can be cool and it can challenge you in the right ways, but it's not whatever, like we all default to just wanting fun, comfy, flowy stuff.
Yeah, and I like you talking about these mental models that we have. I've seen an article in, I think, Gripped magazine where they talked about spray walls and boards shouldn't have kickers because rock doesn't break except for in parallel planes. So no outdoor boulders have kickers.
Amazing.
Like, okay. Rock in Wyoming and Texas and Chattanooga
The
and
rocks I saw in Utah just
West
last
Virginia and Utah, that's all different. Because I've seen kickers on outdoor boulders a million times.
week. Yeah.
But that's the mental model of that author, is that rock somehow is created in perfect 45-degree angles all the time. And that's not reality, you know? I had a conversation with John Sherman in Waco Tanks, and I've brought this up on the podcast before, but he said when they were first developing Waco Tanks, they walked past every one of the compression boulders. All of these famous boulders that are there now, they walked right past them and thought, there's no boulder there. There are no holds.
There are no holds.
Not in the way we understand them. You know, we don't understand the way to fit your body around these features and make it climbable. And it's certainly possible that these things that are up on gym walls now that we don't recognize as outdoor boulders are just because we've never encountered these things indoors either. They're new movements to us. And maybe once we get better versed in these things, we'll start to see them outside. These affordances will start to appear for us that we didn't recognize before. You know, same as we see in a lot of new videos of old boulders outside where kids are double dynoing and paddle dynoing from one hold to another and making it look way easier than keeping the tension the way that we always did, you know?
Yeah. You know, cool example, John Cardwell, pro climber, who is, I would say, I mean, our generation's old school climber in the sense that he's been climbing since he was little, like probably since maybe close to the 90s. He was a little tot at that point, but he's trying Esperanza right now, and he couldn't consistently do the span move from the ground. He's inverting and throwing a toe hook into the finish jug and walking his hands up from there. Amazing. Super cool.
New school beta
On a very old school climb that a lot of people have done. And he's like, I wouldn't even call him a new school climber. It's not like he's some, 16-year-old who inverts all the time.
Right.
But he took this new school and he was like, oh, like this thing that maybe I thought was impossible because of my wingspan before, there's a way.
Yeah. I love these comp style boulders and comp style setting. It's one of the first places I go when I walk into a modern mega gym. First I do the like compression slopey boulders that make me look really good.
Yeah.
And then I go to these comp style boulders because they're opening me up to new moves I've never experienced. They make me think in a different way. They make me organize my body in a different way. And that stuff's just going to carry over to opening up new beta possibilities on boulders that you find really difficult. It's going to allow me to see different boulders when I'm out looking at new things. And I'm like, well, that's clearly not a boulder. That can't be climbed.
Yeah.
Oh, but what if I were to invert? What if I were to be able to paddle dyno? Would this work? I just think the old guard who views the 45-degree crimp ladder as the mental model of climbing is missing the boat entirely.
Yeah. And it is funny too, because I remember when I started climbing, what was considered comp climbing then is now what people consider outdoor climbing. Because it was like big jumpy moves, like, but between like decent holds, and it wasn't paddling. Like they're like, oh, that's like outdoor power style. But back then, when everything was set as a spray wall, whenever you would have a comp, and it was like these big jumping moves between like beefy holds, that was like, no, comp style.
Yeah, exactly. The climbing was supposed to be a line of crimps up a 45-degree wall that only one person in this group could hold on to,
Exactly.
And I think, we make the argument with this comp style stuff. Well, the reason they have to go to that is because all the climbers are so strong and anybody could hold on to these crimps now. And I think that's probably true, but they're also, like I said, opening up entirely new movements to us. And I think that's way more important than it's being given credit for.
Totally.
So if you're in these gyms and they have this style that you don't like, that you're like, I'm never going to use this outside, even if you don't use that exact style, it's still teaching you some things about how you organize your body, how you view beta, what the possibilities might be. Spend some time on those things. Doesn't have to be all of your time, but maybe don't just thumbs down your gym because that's a lot of the setting.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think a lot of these big macro holds are just like climbing outside, except for climbing outside isn't, a big pink hold where you only use, a tiny percentage of the hold. It's a giant boulder where you only use a tiny percentage of the boulder.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not saying that this setting style is perfect and that it's the only, I don't think it's actually fitting everything we need for climbing outside. In fact, I want it to be a little more fucked up. Outdoor climbing's weird. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't like weird. I wrote a blog a couple years ago. It was something like outdoor classics would make terrible gym climbs.
Yeah.
And it's true. So many amazing, or just so many boulders outside that are wonderful challenges where you're like, this is so unique and so cool. They have sharp holds and they're the holds are facing the really wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And you're applying a ton of pressure with your feet to an uncomfortable degree. It's hard for all the wrong reasons. Man, no one would climb those in the gym. I want them. I would love if they were there. Yep. And I would love for route setting to incorporate more of that. And some places do. But it's I get why you wouldn't, because people would just be like, this is trash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you can't get over yourself and, you're just going to complain every time you go in the gym because of the setting, you've got the boards. Your gym, your modern mega gym probably has a training area that has all the boards. And, they've been put together specifically by people who are training for outdoor rock climbing, and they're trying to make it more like outdoor rock climbing. So by all means, go and climb on those things. I think they're a really valuable tool. But maybe as you get older, you'll check yourself. Maybe as you get older, you're just going to go deeper into the grumpy rabbit hole that you're in.
Mm-hmm. One last thing I'll say about route setting, and something that I benefited from a lot, was I used to, from climbing outside, indoors there are a lot more shouldering moves, and you can find a lot more of these aggressive moves. In that style, big, wide moves, jumpy moves. And for me, I hadn't done nearly as much outside. And a lot of that is my style. I love keeping my feet on. That is something that, it's probably because I got good at it. And so I just did it more. And I found ways to keep my feet on even for jump moves. But when I first went to this gym in Houston, man, every now and then I'd find these boulders where I'm like, this is just heinous. And they all were set by the same person. And what I ended up doing at one point, I was like, well, I can't do these boulders. Even V7s, it would take me a lot of work, or it would make my shoulders kind of grumpy. So I started doing shoulder mobility work, weighted mobility work. So I do kettlebell pullovers. I would do inverted iron cross work with dumbbells. I was doing all these things to make my shoulders stronger. And I sought out this one setter. Anytime he put a boulder up, and it's funny because now I can just I don't have to look at the tags. I know which ones are his. But I sought out his stuff, and I would always just, first thing priority was to climb his stuff.
Yeah, I love having a setter frenemy.
It was.
Your Lex Luthor that is going to set something that you absolutely hate, love.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's amazing to have.
Yeah. And a turning point for me was one day I had walked in and they were route setting, or they were forerunning, and I watched him climb on his boulders.
Mm.
And I was like, God damn it. These aren't just heinous and weird. It's because watching him, he's wildly strong through his upper body. And like, you know, he just looked like a piece of steel when he would like hit these Gastons. And I was like, that'd be nice. I'd like some of that for myself. You know, maybe I should work towards this.
Here's how you get it.
Yeah, exactly. He laid out a roadmap.
Yep. Good news. I've laid it out for you.
And it's funny because, man, I'd be climbing in there, and all the time people would be like, oh, you know, this person's boulder. And they're like, it's just always so shouldery and powerful. And I was like, yep, you should do it. Like,
Totally.
so yeah, if you like find yourself a setter friend of me,
Yep.
like,
Absolutely. That's one of the best things you can have.
maybe go to the comment box and be like, hey, send me some more of those Iron Cross. Like, I love those Iron Cross footless boulders you're setting. Can we get some more of those?
Yeah. Hey, arch rival.
Hey, arch rival. More kryptonite, please.
Yeah, totally. And if you are in the modern mega gym world, specifically in Salt Lake City, and looking for somebody to help guide you through the modern mega climbing gym, Nate is doing private coaching at the Momentum Gyms in Salt Lake. So reach out to him. You can find him at Nate Drolet on Instagram. You can also get a hold of him through our website, which is powercompanyclimbing.com. You can find us at Power Company Climbing on the Facebooks, the Instagrams, Pinterest, YouTubes, all the places, except for the Twitter, because we don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
Maybe don't know.
This time, 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 this time,